Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special event, which has been transferred over from my channel, El Dia Opina, to James's channel, The Rational Rise and the James Fox Higgins Show. I'm extremely grateful to you, James, for allowing me the chance to utilize this platform. And I'm
My
hoping
pleasure.
to be able to conduct more of, yes, I am hoping to be able to conduct more of these special events, and these special debates when I have my streaming access returned. But for right now, let me introduce you to the subject of today's debate. Is God good? Both parties have agreed that in order to argue this debate properly on either side, we need to assume that the God of the Bible exists. So arguing against is my friend, the heathen, Daniel Wagner of the channel, Unframe of Mind. Say hello, Daniel.
Hey, what's going on? Thanks, Dia. You would start on that foot, wouldn't you?
I'm sorry. I had to. Arguing for is also my friend, the born-again Christian Sir James Fox Higgins of the channel you are currently watching. Say hello.
Thanks for the invite, dear. And for knighting me again. So we've got a heathen and a knight. Well, off to a good start.
Wow.
It's just your name.
I brought my sword as well.
Yeah. Your name is just, it needs to be knighted. Okay. So all of our respective channels and details will be in the description box below. The goal of this debate is to destroy the opponent. Just a joke. Okay.
Yeah,
No.
I wasn't prepared.
yeah. Blood sport?
I need
Really?
another month.
Yeah.
Another month.
It's a joke. Okay, no, just kidding. But I'll lay out the framework. Whilst there is no set structure, we will begin with introductions. Daniel will go first, as we have all agreed to this. It will be 1 to 7 minutes to lay out your introduction and premise as to why God is not good. When your time is complete, we will move on to James, who will lay out his premise and introduction as to why God is good. And from that point on, we will just have a discussion. My role is to host and moderate. If I find that there is a point that has gone unanswered or unacknowledged on either side, I will raise it. I am to remain neutral and predominantly silent, which is obviously, for these guys, they know me quite well, so that will be hard for me. But that is the goal. So, gentlemen, let us begin. Daniel, is God good?
Is God good? All right. So I'll just start by saying that whenever I discuss with people, I usually get the usual answers like, because he just is, as if that were just plain and simple, obvious truth. Sometimes I get specific verses. Mark 10 says that, and Jesus said to him, "Why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone." 1 Timothy 4 says, "For everything created by God is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it is received with gratitude." Psalm 34 says, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. How blessed is the man who takes refuge in him." In fact, there are actually about 61 references to the goodness of God in the Bible. So we're here today to answer the question, what does it actually mean to be good? And I think it's safe to say in the context of this conversation, to be good is to be morally excellent, virtuous, or righteous. And second question is, how do we know someone is morally excellent? Well, and I guess the other question that stems from that is, by what measure do we determine if someone is virtuous? So I think we can all agree that actions do speak louder than words. And since we can't read minds, the best method we have for determining if someone is good is by examining their actions. So I want to start by talking about the recent genocide of white South African farmers. So in March 10th, 2017, Nikki Simpson, a 64-year-old elderly woman, was attacked in her farm home west of Johannesburg. According to her, the attackers used an electric drill on the soles of her feet. Her ribs were broken, and she suffered multiple stab wounds on her arms. October 1st, 2016, Johan Huenis, a chicken farmer, husband, and father of 3, and soon to be 4, was killed by home invaders preying on South African farmers. His daughter, 6 years old at the time, tried to offer the men her piggy bank if they would just stop hurting her father. She was promptly shot at, but fortunately she did survive. The attackers missed. February 18th, 2017, Sue Howarth, 64, and her husband, Robert Lynn, 66, were tied up, stabbed, and tortured with a blowtorch for several hours. Their attackers stuffed plastic bags down Sue's throat and attempted to strangle Mr. Lynn with a black bag around his neck. They gave the attackers what they wanted, but that wasn't enough to satisfy their thirst for violence. After being loaded in the truck and left for dead next to the road, they were discovered with shots to the head. Mr. Lynn survived, and Mrs. Howarth later died in intensive care. So these are just a few examples of the egregious violence inflicted on people by people. We'd never look at these examples and claim that the perpetrators are somehow moral or virtuous. The most obvious observation people might make is this. If God is good, why does he allow these things to happen? It seems like a pretty straightforward question. I'd like to take the question one step further. I would ask, if God is so moral and righteous, why would he do these things? Remember, we're judging morality and one's goodness based on actions. Now, in the book of Job, God is so proud of Job, and is convinced that nothing can turn him towards evil. Satan challenges God, pointing out that, of course, Job is faithful. Everything good Job has is because of God. God accepts the challenge, saying to Satan in Job 1:12, "Behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand." So basically, as long as Satan, doesn't directly harm Job, he can do whatever he wants to attempt to challenge his faith. Satan, with God's permission, proceeds to kill Job's livestock. His servants are slain by the swords of the Sabeans and the Chaldeans, and the house that held Job's children collapsed on them, killing all of them. But that wasn't enough to satisfy the violence. God then gives Satan permission to destroy Job himself, plaguing him with severe sickness and loathsome, torturous souls all over his body. If actions do indeed speak louder than words, this does not sound like the actions of a good God to me. So next, I'll take you to China 2012. Yu Rongfen was 7 months pregnant with her second child when authorities came to her door. They had orders from the City Planning Bureau to forcibly perform a late-term abortion. Why? Because the policy preventing Chinese citizens from having more than one child. The authorities held her down and performed the abortion against her will as she lay there kicking and screaming, begging them to stop. She lay there in shock after the deed was done, and she could feel her baby dying inside her. Gradually, the kicking inside became weaker. She birthed a stillborn baby boy a day later. So today we would never claim this as a morally excellent thing to do. Again, people might wonder, if God is so good, why would he allow this to happen to innocent children? I would again take this question a step further and ask, if God is so good, why does he do these things? Exodus 11:5. Every firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the slave girl who is behind the handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle, and there shall be a great cry throughout the land of Egypt, such as there has never been, nor will ever be again. At midnight, the Lord, this goes into Exodus 12:29. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of the Pharaoh who sat in his throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn livestock. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where someone was not dead. Now, if indeed actions do speak louder than words, this does not sound like the actions of a good, moral, or virtuous God to me. The BTK killer was a trusted Cub Scout leader, respected as a church-going family man, and accepted as a regular guy with secure marriage and a steady job with all the other trappings of middle-class success. He was also an insatiable murderer who tortured and killed 17 strangers over 17 years, boasting about his crimes in taunting, gruesome letters and poems that he mailed to the police and the news media. If pressed, I'm sure his friends and family could have said 61 good things about him, but we would never characterize the BTK killer as a good man. Now, I would argue that God is not good. In fact, he is an evil and disturbed mass murderer, a petty and jealous totalitarian responsible for the deaths of over 2 million plus people, and that's just what's listed in the Bible. I have massive sympathy for anyone who worships him and point out that you are suffering from a textbook case of Stockholm Syndrome with a severe side of trauma bonding. Thank you.
Okay. James.
All right. Well, I'm going to take a slightly different approach. Thanks for that, Daniel. I want to look a little bit more closely at the question itself. Is God good? In this question, is good a noun or an adjective? There's two ways to mean the word good. There is to be good as a characteristic, a subset of your person, or there's the noun good, the good itself, the very essence of good, or the source of all good. Now, a noun, if that is the case for this question, is God equivalent to good? It suggests an equivalence. Is God and good one and the same thing? An adjective, if it was the adjective, would suggest that God, that goodness or good is one of God's characteristics. But then that means that good is a transcendent objective quality by which we can judge God, which is exactly what Daniel is doing here. Daniel has identified that good is a transcendent quality by which he is judging God. But God the God that exists in the Bible, cannot be judged. God is the judge of all things. I'll point to some scripture here. Psalm 50, verse 6. And the heavens declare his righteousness, for God himself is judge. Isaiah 33:22. For the Lord is our judge. The Lord is our lawgiver. The Lord is our king. He will save us. 2 Timothy 4:8. In the future there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing. That's a reference to Christ, of course. James 5:9. Do not complain, brethren, against one another, so that you yourselves may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing right at the door. Now, an earthly judge may be less than the ideal that he represents. Obviously, that's the case in the courts of human law in our societies. We grant a judge in a court special power to make decisions based on his character and his reputation, but he himself is judged against the higher ideal, or the standard that is good. But God is so much more than a judge we have granted power to. God is the source of that power. See in these verses, in Nehemiah 9:6, you alone are the Lord. You have made the heaven of heavens with all their host, the earth and all that is on it, the seas and all that is in them. You give life to all of them, and the heavenly host bows down before you. Isaiah 66:2, for my hand made all these things. Thus all these things came into being, declares the Lord. But to this one I will look, to him who is humble and contrite of spirit, and who trembles at my word. 1 Timothy 4:4, for everything created by God is good, and nothing is to be rejected if it is received with gratitude. I think that's one that you referenced earlier, Daniel. There are many examples, of course, including the creation account itself in Genesis, which most people are familiar with. But God is the creator and the source of all things. Now, if God is good is an equivalence of two nouns, God and good being one and the same, then that would suggest that God is equal to the good. But the scripture tells us that the things God creates are good, and they cannot be equivalent to God. They are less than him. So I take this question in the adjective form, describing our experience of God, that God is good in our experience. Good is one of the things that God is, but it's not the totality of him. He is so much more than good. He is greater than good. Above all, God is the source and the creator of all being, all life, all matter, all energy, all space and time, and all consciousness, and so without God, no good can exist. John 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him not anything was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. God is the creator of the whole universe and everything within it. Therefore, even our moral frameworks and moral agents are subsequent to the axiom of God and his nature. Thus, we cannot derive a notion of goodness without first existing. That's self-evident. And our existence, as the Bible clearly states, is dependent upon God. All goodness comes from God, but God is not merely good. God is greater than good. God is greater than all things. A very wise friend of mine once said that if you were trying to think of God and you're placing anything above him, and that would include the idea of goodness or the good, then you're not thinking of God. You've created a straw man, which is what Daniel has done in his opening here. He's created a straw man version of God that is below the transcendent ideal of goodness. But God is necessarily the transcendent judge over all things, all people, all matter, and all ideas. There is no good but the good that comes from God. We've made the terrible and grievous mistake as human beings to make ourselves the arbiters of what is good and righteous and holy. And we did this in the Garden of Eden, in the very first book of the Bible. And we've lived in sin and death ever since. That is the result of our arrogance of placing ourselves above God as the judge. Now, I intend to illustrate in our discussion today, as we go back and forth, that the atheistic claim to knowledge of what is good without God is an exercise in absurdity. There can be no good at all without God. And Daniel, I'd like to finish here by asking you, what is your objective measure of good? You said at the beginning that we need to define what is good and what our measure is, but you didn't actually provide a measure other than your preferences for behavior or the things that you expect of yourself to feel like a good person. But what is your measure? Upon what standard do you base your judgment of God?
Okay. Daniel, do you have a response?
Yeah, I think I can work something out here. So basically, what I'm looking at in the beginning here is, if we're looking at the definition of good, I guess before we can really answer the question, we have to understand what are we agreeing on is that definition. The question was not what else is God besides good. The question we're here to answer today is God good? So if you're saying that good and God are equal, then the question makes no sense. Is God God? Well, yeah, that's kind of obvious. Is good good? Well, obviously they equal each other. But I don't think that that's quite what we have in mind when you and I are trying to go back and forth on this debate as to whether or not God is good. I'm sure both of us maybe have different ideas of what good actually means.
So what does it mean to you, I guess? Because I'm not claiming the equivalency argument. I said that it could be that God and good are equivalent, and I don't think that's enough. I think good is less than God. God is above good. And so good is a characteristic, just like, well, it's a bit different to me saying I'm a good person or when I do something good, it's good, because that has a transcendent idea of what goodness is above me. And we would agree that goodness is greater than the person doing good, and that's how we judge it. But I'm saying that God is above that even. And I'm wondering by what standard you define good for the case of this argument.
I think the question stands, is God good? So James has opened it up to it's still relevant. So what is your response to your definition of good, and is humanity the arbiter of good?
I would frame it another way and just say, Daniel, how do we know what good is, if not by the standard of God?
Well, I can't say to answer that. As far as how do we know words mean what they mean? That's just kind of how language develops over time. I'm just basically going off the definition of good being morally excellent, God being equal to virtuous or righteous. And these are all words that mean something to us. We kind of have a general sense, if you ask if somebody is good, if they are moral, you kind of have a general sense of what that means and what kind of behaviors would present themselves to, be able to make you say in the affirmative, yeah, that's a good person. That's a moral person. If I'm trying to use a word, God is good, or even better than good, and I'm trying to say that I am also a good person, or you are also a good person, then we're using good two completely different ways in two completely different contexts. And that just doesn't work, I don't think, for the course of this particular discussion. I think we really need to just agree on what the actual definition we're using is, because if we don't have definitions, we can't have a discussion beyond that.
Let's define our terms.
I totally agree. So Daniel, what's your definition of good?
So just again, the basic definition I was going with was morally excellent, virtuous, and righteous.
And so
James,
how do you know what is morally excellent, virtuous, and righteous?
Well, before I answer that, what would be your definition of good? Or would you agree that one is a sufficient definition?
Oh, it's sufficient in reference to its meaning, right? But it's not. Are you arguing that there is an objective standard? Is what I'm asking. Is there objective goodness and badness, or is it just based on feelings? Like what we feel is good, and then that could be different for everyone.
Objective?
Yeah.
Right. I would definitely point you in the direction of Stefan Molyneux's work is in terms of universally preferable behavior. And I know you are very well researched on this, and so I don't have to explain the concepts that go along with that. But
although we should break it down, like try to distill it for anyone who's watching who may not be familiar with it, just the essence of it.
Right. So basically, what universally preferable behavior is, at least in the nutshell version, as best as I can explain it, is that there are certain things that you can do, certain behaviors that would be that I would want somebody to. Okay, I would not want somebody to murder me. Let's go with that. And you would not want somebody to murder you. We can't both want to be murdered at the same time. That just makes no logical sense. We can't both want to be raped at the same time. That just makes no logical sense. That's
in fact, if you want to be murdered, it's not murder, it's euthanasia. And if you want to be raped, it's not rape, it's consensual sex. So
and in that case, like I was getting to that, we have different words for that. We have different completely different concepts for that very thing. and when we tie it back to the idea of good, again, we have a concept for good. I mean, I would challenge you to look at something. I mean, I'm sure there's examples of you and I looking at the same thing and saying that that's good, and you looking at the same thing saying that's bad. That's kind of, obviously the gray area between this, but there are some pretty obvious ones, like the rape and murder examples of, murder's probably not good because nobody wants that. That's not something you want.
But there are
Again,
cultures that think it's good. Like there are areas of the Islamic world that totally think murdering homosexuals is okay, and they totally think that raping women is okay. And so there, and I'm not saying
that wouldn't be universally preferable. That between the two, that would be a very one-sided decision.
So
in that.
under the guise of Stefan Molyneux's argument, that's not in the universally preferable argument. So is that something, James, that you can acknowledge?
So the benchmark of UPB is universality. Would you agree with that, Daniel? That universality is how we judge whether something is truly objectively good and not just like we think it's good or our culture says it's good. We can judge it objectively if it's universally preferable, which requires universality.
Yeah, that would be outside space, outside time. That would be no matter where you're at, who you are, no matter what religion you follow, no matter what belief system or culture you grow up in. These would be principles that, when you get down to the very basic nuts and bolts of it, are universal and pretty easy to agree on.
Sounds transcendent.
Now, people vegans would argue, yeah, but, animals don't get included in that. And I guess we could agree here as well that this only applies to moral agents who are people capable of conceiving of what is good and bad, and animals don't fit that category. So would you agree with that? That universality of behavior, or the preferability being universal for moral agents, which, as far as we know, is just humans. I'm
sorry, can you rephrase the question?
So the benchmark by which you're judging what is good is whether it is universally preferable, as you say, in all situations, all times, for moral agents only. Doesn't apply to animals.
I mean, in this particular definition, as long as it falls under something that's moral, virtuous, righteous, I think that would all kind of fall into the same category. Pretty synonymous. I don't think anybody would argue against that.
Well, necessarily. Okay. So again, you've just brought it back to where we started, which is you're defining good by moral, virtuous, and righteous are the synonyms with good. I agree. And I asked you, how do you judge that? And you referred to universally preferable behavior. So the benchmark of universally preferable behavior as an ethical model is universality. And so I think that's pretty clear. And I think you'd agree with that. So I'll just ask, why is universality the benchmark? Why not just do what's good for us?
Why is universe? I'm sorry, what was that? Dia?
I said response.
Oh,
do you
sorry.
have a response? I was just sort of.
The question was, sorry, brain farting. What was the question one more time?
Okay, so why does morality have to be universal? Why do we all have to be able to prefer something for it to be good? Why can't I just do what's good for me even if it's bad for you?
So we're I assume heading toward the ought versus is issue in this case. How do you get an ought out of that? Like what ought we do versus what is?
Well, I mean,
direction you're heading.
You can break that down and go there if you want. I'm just asking, how do you know, and on how can you prove that universality is the correct moral framework?
What's right for one person, why is it not okay for another?
The answer to that, I would say I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. So I don't place God in that because that obviously, or not obviously, but also does not make sense to me either. I don't have an answer for why don't I have an answer, or why don't it make sense to me?
Let him finish his thought.
Sorry, yeah.
You're good at these jabs, man. You keep throwing them in.
Keep going. Daniel.
Right. Okay, so I completely lost my train of thought again. It's too many things.
My apologies. I'll try to refrain from interrupting.
No, you're fine. It's
That's
not
my
your
job.
fault. I've got like 3 different streams of thought trying to go at the same time. It's not working very well.
Well, we got a bit of time.
You're right. So the question you're wanting to ask is why not, or why don't I have an answer for universality?
Well, I'll
And
wind it.
why don't I have it?
I'll wind it back a little bit to make my question clearer, and I'll frame it as an accusation instead of a question. I don't believe you have any logical grounds to define what is good. And the reason I say that is you cannot define good without referring to another concept down the line, and that will invariably lead you into an infinite regress, right? You cannot define any moral claim or any truth claim or any knowledge claim without referring to something else. And so anything you think you only know A because of B, and you only know B because of C. And that goes on ad infinitum unless there is a causeless foundation or a completely transcendent foundation like God.
So why does not having an answer as to why I follow the particular I've chosen the particular moral system that I've chosen, in this case universally preferable behavior, why does there automatically have to be some causal being, why does the cause have to be a being or a god of some sort? Why does it have to be, you understand what
Yes,
I'm
I do.
asking here?
I do.
I think
So
James's point is go.
So
Go, go, go.
for truth to actually be truth, it must be objective. Would you agree with that?
I would agree.
Okay. And for morality to actually be morality, it must be objective. Right? Which means there must be a fixed, it can't just be, well, I think rape is fine, so who are you to tell me no? You're going to say, no, rape is wrong because it breaches UPB, right? And so it's not objective. Well, I'm saying that UPB is insufficient to prove that the moral claims about rape and theft and assault are not merely I subjectively choose universality, but you don't have to. Morality to function in a society must be reciprocal, and we see that it's not in so many cases between cultures, right? But people who, I guess Western thinking largely, philosophical thinking, Stefan Molyneux, people like yourself and me, I totally respect the UPB model. I don't refute it. I just think it's insufficient. It doesn't actually provide an objective standard by which to judge morality. It's just, as you said, it's a system you've chosen. That's fine. But why can I not just choose a different system and that be cool too?
What is the objective standard?
We have to, if I have a system and you have a system and they don't agree, then we need to look to an objective standard, right? And what is your objective standard to judge this definition of morality?
So I think what I see going on here is that I'm following a specific set of moral principles, and you're following a specific set of moral principles, and your the beginning or the causal reason for all of that is you have God, you have the Bible, you have those eternally written moral values that come with the Bible, and I have a blank space.
Well, you actually have the Bible too, and your morality is built on God as well, but you deny it. That's what I'm saying. You don't. You claim to have a blank space, but you don't, because morality is absurdity without God.
Morality is absurdity without God. Okay.
Unless you can present another objective benchmark.
Finish my thought. What is wrong with actually having an area where I just don't know? I mean, what's wrong with still exploring that and trying to figure that out and trying to dig down deeper? I guess the example that comes to mind is when I look back through history, through all the different gods. You look at the Romans and the Greeks, where they had multiple gods, and eventually they realized that's just like the steady progression toward a single deity. God kept getting pushed farther and farther away, and now we have I'm sure you've heard the argument of the God of the gaps. As a former atheist, I'm sure you've argued this one many times, and there's always that ability for a Christian to go, yeah, that's God, that's why, and it's all there, it's all written in the Bible, it's all there for you to see, and I'm okay, I'm comfortable with going, I don't know yet, I don't have an answer for you, I don't have this a book necessarily to go by to give you an answer, because I don't believe that. But that being said, I feel like we're getting really far away from the original question, and
We're
I
just
think
trying to
we've kind of
define
gone
one of
into
the
a
three words in the original question. I think that's
right.
exactly what we
Well,
need to do.
James, what is wrong with the response that Daniel just gave regarding all the other deities? And
Well, other deities
and
is definitely a
that rabbit
digression.
hole.
We've certainly agreed that we're looking at the God of the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament. So
Yes, we have.
But I hear what you're saying about the God of the gaps, and I'm certainly not trying to argue that. I'm saying that there is no knowledge at all without God. There is no morality at all, and I have in the Bible and in God, and even leaving the Bible out, just logically, I have in the foundation of a transcendent creator of the universe from which all things, including goodness, stem, including morality, and certainly knowledge, stem from God. I have a foundation that stitches up that infinite regress or that circular logic. There is a virtuous circularity to the logic that has God in the equation. There is a viciousness to the circularity that has a gap. Your circle is incomplete, and you just have to skip over the part that is the logical foundation of all knowledge. Like you actually don't have any right to claim to know what is good unless you have an objective standard. And you haven't come up with one yet, and I say that the only objective standard is God.
So Daniel, he's bringing it back to the basics.
Right, you basically just went through and restated what I have already said. You didn't really add anything new to that particular argument.
So
you just said exactly what I just said.
So to sum it up, then you don't know what good is, which is what you said. And I do.
I mean,
God is good.
If
yes.
you look at, wow, getting feisty, aren't you? So if we look at basically if we stand back and we look at we go back to definitions of what we have to work with. Our language evolves over time to accommodate these concepts that it takes a really long time to put together. I mean, the concepts that we have in our mind, a lot of people way back when were still trying to struggle with these things. And in place of those struggles, there was a lot of comfort in filling those holes with God, or filling holes with the standard religion or the standard belief system. I can go back and look at all sorts of examples of many things being borrowed from pagan religions and everything else. I've done pieces on this where Christians are probably more pagan, I would argue, than Christian because of all the different practices that they've picked up. It's a blender of different things, and nobody really has a universal agreement. I can talk to 15 different Christians and get 15 different answers about what morality is. How do we know God is good? Like, it's not consistent. And it's like nobody's okay with just saying, I don't know. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's where growth happens, is in the I don't know. And it's the most important piece of the scientific method, I think, because it invokes a sense of curiosity, of wonder, of enlightenment, of like, what the hell is out there? Like, what how do we know? And how do we, like, why do we just assume God's out there? And that makes us stop looking. That's just kind of where I'm coming from on this. I'm kind of rambling.
Can I pop that in a nutshell for James?
I got it.
No, not for you, but like, okay, go ahead.
I got him.
You keep invoking the God of the gaps argument, but it's not the argument that I'm making. I'm just trying to find a bedrock for our definitions here. We've already agreed on what God means in this question, and we're referring to Yahweh, the God of the Bible. But what we have not been able to define sufficiently yet is what good means. Now you're saying that morality. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you're saying is morality is objective. So we can, hold each other to account when there are moral breaches in our behavior, but you don't know why morality is objective or what it's based on. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm not saying there's not an answer. I'm saying I personally don't know. I have not done enough research to come to a fully sufficient answer, even for myself. I'm not trying to argue that there is no answer at all. I just don't have it yet, or maybe nobody has it yet.
We're here at a debate arguing.
No,
on the premise of knowledge, aren't we?
On the premise of knowledge?
Well, is God good? You need to know that, don't you? But I was just going to say that, James, you get to respond to Daniel's point regarding changing words over time. That's what I was going to say before.
Yes, words definitely evolve over time. Language evolves over time, and as you know, your very first answer to my question to you, Daniel, about what good means is, you know, you're referring to other words, right? Morality, right, moral, righteous, and whatever the third one was, but
Virtuous.
virtuous. Yeah. So then we've got other words we need to define, right? And so what I'm asking is there a single datum? Like, let's zoom out just for a little bit, just away from the question, because this is important to be able to be clear. If you'll indulge me,
Let's
can
not
you
go on
offer
too many
me?
tangents.
Can you?
No indulging.
Can you offer me any single datum that can be defined in and of itself, that is causeless, and doesn't need to refer to another datum to give it meaning?
Can you?
Yes, I can.
I know that seems like a shitty answer, but
Yeah, it was. I mean,
God
yeah.
isn't that. I mean, God isn't that, because you can look at the Bible, and the Bible uses words to express that idea, and then you have to go back and define what are those words.
The Bible is not
Like,
God. Don't conflate the Bible and God. The
No,
Bible
no,
is the
it's like-
story
Just
of God
separate.
described, but
the,
God
the
Himself.
Bible is supposed to be the Word of God. Bible is God breathed. Is that
yeah,
correct?
yeah. The Bible is God using
So
words
everything
to
that
speak
the Bible
to us.
says is upheld by God's, right? I mean, it's all, you know, like God said, here's your instruction manual. This is how to live your life.
I'll give you another example. This is a book that I wrote. This is my words, right? But this book is
Right.
not me. I created this, but it's not me.
I know. I completely agree with you. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to conflate the two.
Yeah. Well, you were conflating the two, because
not
I'm
at
just
all.
trying to say you were saying God is not that causeless, self-evident datum. You were saying God has words to describe Him, and I'm saying no, the Bible has words to describe Him, God Himself. And I understand you don't believe in God, or you think you don't believe in God, and and so you are preferring. It's hard for you to argue from a position where He exists, but we have agreed that for this question of His goodness to even arise, we have to agree, for the sake of argument, that He exists. So if God exists, God is that causeless cause behind all things, and the Bible validates that in its description of Him. And so I'm just asking, can you present an alternative datum other than God that is the self-evident causeless axiom upon which you can build all meaning?
Not within the argument that assumes God does exist. No.
Forget. That's what I'm saying. Like,
right,
if you want to say God doesn't exist,
from, no.
Yeah, so take God out of it. That's why I'm saying let's zoom out for a second. You can.
And I already answered that. I said no. I can't think of a single word or datum that would represent what you were saying. I'm not going to try to speak it as eloquently as you, but yeah,
sure.
that's no. I don't have a single point.
Upon which to build any meaning.
I think a lot of what we're talking about here today is a whole lot of just semantics and trying to get around all the specific details of the words.
Semantics are important, are they not?
I mean, they are
details. The details that need to be established.
It's not semantics.
Right.
It's if you want to judge God by a moral presupposition of any kind about what good is, you need to be able to define that. And so far, you can't.
Right. I feel like I need to. I'm trying to sit here as my meager, blind self. I can only see a portion of who God is, and I'm trying to determine, okay, what makes this guy worthy of worship, or guy, girl, whatever it is. We'll just, for simplicity's sake, we'll just say he. What makes him worth worshiping? And then I look at the Bible and I see all these different examples of what has happened. I look at all these different contradictions, and I look at all these different, and it's not making a lot of sense to me. And in my experience, for most people that have become atheists, the biggest cure for Christianity is to read the Bible, because there's so many points that just don't make sense and they don't add up. It's like I'm sitting here trying to determine, okay, this is the only thing I have to see to determine where I'm going to go in life. And I see somebody that's doing some really heinous shit. Like, maybe it don't make sense to me. Maybe God has a plan. I don't know. But maybe that would make him somebody that's doesn't really give a shit about me. Maybe we are just clay to him. We're nothing. We don't matter. Because you can't have a situation where God is intervening in your life. Everything you have is good, and at the same time, He's also going out and doing all this heinous shit to people, and you can't have them both at the same time.
So what
And
would
if
you
I'm sitting
say
there
is
looking
something worth?
at that,
Sorry,
I can't in my heart determine that. Yeah, that's a great guy. That's a great dude. Of course I'm going to worship him. I might, but it's not going to be because he's good. It's because I'm fucking scared for my life. Excuse
So
me.
your example is the illustration of the Bible, and you find it questionable. James, what is your response to that?
What is something that you could get behind? Like, what is, anything? It doesn't have to be a god. I just mean, what is something that you could worship? What is something that you think, you've placed God where you see him on the hierarchy of goodness, and it's not at the top. So what is an idea or an action or a thing or a person that is at the top?
I'll tell you. I will tell you this. I'm not going to say I'll give you this, but I will tell you this. I think you and I have both listened to the same Jordan Peterson lectures, and both of us got very different things out of it. I heard it. Okay, I know you heard it based on the coming out story, so to speak. That you heard it and realized, oh, that's my path. That's where I'm going to go. Is that fair to say?
That was part of it. Yeah, definitely.
So, right. I'm just trying to kind of for time's purpose. Anyway, so I heard those lectures at the same time, and I'm sitting there thinking, man, is there such a thing as a Christian atheist? Is that a thing? Like, is that even possible? Because
I've seen the words.
Right. To be honest, when I listen to Jordan Peterson, he makes perfect sense. And when he's talking about the Bible through a completely logical standpoint, I would be curious to see what he says about these stories later. But if he's looking at it through a completely logical standpoint about the highest, like, attainable goal that you could possibly strive for, that you could never possibly reach, like, that's great. That's a good thing to look for. And I think most people need that in their life. I think most people can't. Again, I'm not sure which direction to go with this. I'm not even going to lie, but I think most people. Jesus.
He's invoking Jesus for help.
Blasphemy.
That's
no.
Yeah,
You call out his name anytime you need help.
No, that's linguistics from back when I was a Christian.
I know. Yeah,
I've been there. That stuff never dies.
Yeah, I still do it.
Yeah, it's just when I heard those lectures, I thought this is some really good stuff. This is awesome level of moral principles, some great things to strive for. It doesn't say God exists. It doesn't say there's God there, but it certainly doesn't hurt for most people. I would argue, I'm going to probably get in trouble for this one, but I would argue for people of lower IQ, it's necessary. I don't think there's any amount of knowledge or breaking down logical arguments to people and talking to people of a lower IQ and getting them to understand. I think God is that simple package for them to understand. It's the filled in holes that makes it easier for them to make it through life without tripping over a crack. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, so I'm totally on board. I'm totally on board with like, if I was to pick any religion, I would probably go toward more the modern day Christian, love your neighbor kind of religion. I just don't fill it in with God. That's just where I'm at.
Yeah.
So, like, I totally, as far as the principles, the virtues, the striving for something better, the bigger, the grander scheme of things that you can't quite wrap your mind around. That's amazing stuff, and I'm totally on board with it. I just can't put the God in the gap. I can't do that.
Sure.
Anyway.
Sorry. What we're seeing here is the classic clash of presuppositional perspectives, where you are a philosophical naturalist. You believe that everything in the universe can be explained, naturally and within our understanding, with the scientific method, and obviously our knowledge of how the universe works is ever expanding, and there is still plenty that we don't understand. We certainly agree on that. But you believe that anything that does happen in the universe has a natural cause and can be explained naturally, and we don't need to invoke a supernatural deity or a supernatural unseen realm of angels and demons and things like that to describe what's happening and to understand it. We just have to further our understanding of the natural universe. That's your presupposition. And so for you, when the question of God or the Bible or religion comes up, you automatically go, well, the universe began without God, and we as man have created God and injected him into our cultural narrative and our mythological narrative in order to fill the gaps of our understanding, in order to give us comfort, in order to structure our society and give us a moral framework that's clearly communicable across time to work with. Is that a fair assessment of the way you see it?
I would say that's a fair assessment.
Yeah. And so I would say that you actually can't know anything without entering an infinite regress or an absurd circular logic that has no foundation without God. Now, your existence...
We could say the same thing about God existence as well. I mean, where'd God come from? Who created God? Where that, you could do the infinite regression argument.
But this is the thing. The God of the Bible is causeless, right? It's not an infinite regress. And there is, so obviously before the Big Bang, if you accept the Big Bang model of how the universe came to be, the question is, well, what was there before? What caused the Big Bang? And that's also an infinite. That's also an
I don't know that
regress.
I accept that argument either. I don't know. I'm perfectly okay with saying I don't know the answer to that.
Sure. And it's just an example, but without.
I feel like
But God. Let me finish my point here. So God God is the causeless cause of all things, right? And that is what is clear in the Bible, the way he's described, and that is the understanding that any thinking Christian has of God. God is the causeless cause, uncreated, creator. Now, without a foundation, we do have an absurd infinite regress. If you don't believe in God, but you believe in the Big Bang, then you must believe that there was something before the Big Bang. I don't mean you, Daniel. I mean you in the general sense. People believe in the Big Bang, then believe that there has to have been something before that. Maybe it's another universe. Maybe it's a cascading series of universes within universes. But it's absurd because there's no end to it. And there's no objective foundation upon which to build any knowledge in our language, in our morality, in our ethics. There's nothing. It's completely absurd to say, as you said earlier, to get an ought from an is, unless we have a foundation to that. And God is the foundation of that. God created all things. And so if we take God out of the picture, we can't actually prove that we know anything at all. All knowledge is either self-referential or it's an infinite regress into other terms, referencing other things, on and on and on, ad infinitum, unless God is at the end of it. So we can't...
You're talking about a false dichotomy here. You're talking about it's got to be either God or it's infinite chaos. It makes no sense. That sounds very much like you've taken
Prove me wrong.
No,
show me a datum.
Honestly, it sounds very similar to the argument of this new... what's it called? The postmodernism argument. I'm having a brain fart as far as what Jordan Peterson's always railing against. Is that what he's talking about? The postmodernists, and the idea that nothing is real. There's no reality. We have to start from it makes no sense. And it sounds
I'm describing
your taken that example and put God in its space and said, "Whew, got it." Now it makes sense, and that's just not the case.
You need to provide an alternative, is what I'm saying. So you so far have you have answered my question earlier, and you've said you don't know what the foundation is, right? So fair enough, but without a foundation, you can't be sure that any of your knowledge is real. You can't actually know anything. It's all belief and it's all faith, but it's foundless faith, right? Whereas we do actually know. We do actually know.
We thought that eating egg yellow.
Right, let each other finish.
Yeah, let me finish. We do know that we know things, and I'm not saying you don't know things. You do know things. You act, I act, Dia acts. Everyone in the world acts out of genuine knowledge. We know that we exist, and you could argue, no, we're all just in the Matrix, and we're all just the figments of a demon's dream. Like those old philosophical questions. But we do know that we exist, and everything we do stems from that axiom that we exist. But how do we know we exist, and how can we prove it objectively? Well, we can't without God. All of it could be completely illusory. And if you follow any line of questioning... Sorry, go on.
You have sense data, and you have empirical evidence that you can go off of. I don't understand what you mean. How do we know we exist? I mean, we know we exist based on the sense data between, obviously I wouldn't be talking to you if you didn't exist. I mean, I know you exist. We're having a conversation. We have that sense data to tell us that, yeah, he's right here in front of me. I have the ability to see him, and he's acknowledging that I'm here too.
But there are people who talk to imaginary friends, right?
How do you know that your sense data is real?
How do you know your sense data is real? Because we have the empirical evidence. If I grab things, I can feel it. If I touch, if I see things, you can see me, and I can see you, and I can say, hey, do you see me? And you're like, yeah, I see you. It's like, oh, we got that verified, and you get enough people around you, you're like, oh yeah, it's like you take this giant clump of little tiny data points and you put it all together and you create a reality out of it, and it's like whenever you are introduced, which I encourage anybody to do this, whenever you're introduced to new knowledge, you change your mind to make that fit if it makes more logical sense. It's like back when we were as a society freaking out because we couldn't eat the yellow runnies of the eggs because it was make you fat, and everybody was eating egg whites. And it's like, well, we got new data, we got new research, we got new information now that says, okay, well, we were wrong. We thought we knew. We knew that. And you're right. How do we know everything's true? I mean, maybe there's some things that I'm still thinking right now that I think is really true, but it's not, and just over time, we continue to collect more and more of those little data points and collectively figure this out as we go, because we're still kind of feeling around in the dark here.
Okay, so you've got your empirical, we all have our empirical and our sense data experience, and we have our memories of the past, right? And that's how we build our sense of reality from the individual perspective. How do you know, Daniel, that tomorrow the sun will rise and that gravity will, the constant of gravity will remain the same, and that things will be this? How do you know that tomorrow things will be the same as they were yesterday?
That's an interesting question. I don't quite understand what your meaning behind the question is, because it seems pretty straightforward. I mean,
where are you leading with that, James?
Okay, well, let me ask, do you know that tomorrow things will be the same as they are today, as far as the constants of the universe?
I mean, if I had to say, of a percentage of certainty that tomorrow is going to come around, and I would say probably 99.9, almost 100. Like, there's probably a slim chance that we might get hit with a meteor tonight, which probably not, because we have scientists out there looking at the stars and they see these things coming from like way farther away than we can even imagine.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about, like, a meteor is within the realm of possibility. It's quite light and happens all the time. I'm not talking about the things that we know can happen reasonably. I'm talking about, how do you know that tomorrow we're not going to wake up and the sun will be gone, completely vanished?
Again, just based on past experience that's created this like knowledge of today. I really don't understand where this question.
The pattern of behavior is your response.
I mean,
James?
The best predictor of future behavior is past relevant behavior, isn't it? And I think that applies equally for the universe in general. I mean, that I don't understand the question beyond that, really.
So but you're referencing, again, it's not an absolute datum of knowledge. It's a reference to something else, right? You're referencing the past in order to know the future. And I'm arguing that we actually cannot know anything. Like, I'll quote scripture here because I think it's relevant. Proverbs 1:7 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." Now, I'm arguing that, again, you don't, your knowledge about the future refers to the past. And that's fair enough. It's totally, like, within our scientific understanding. I'm not saying that that's crazy or wrong, right? But I'm saying it's the first stage in that infinite regress. Because how do we know that the past was real? And how do we know that how did we know yesterday that today would have been like the day before? All of it is this, it begins this sequence of reference of data all the way back to, you don't know.
To what?
You don't know.
Okay.
I do. God.
I mean,
knowledge,
you don't
all
know
knowledge.
Either, to be fair.
I do know. And I know that because God is behind all existence and all matter and all of those universal laws. God doesn't contradict science.
The only evidence you have for that is the book that you're referencing.
No,
that
the
was
evidence.
Written by me.
No, the evidence that I have for that is my sensory.
How do you know?
Empirically,
what happened
I know.
Beyond?
Empirically, it's self-evident that God is real because existence exists, right? And existence is absurd unless God created it. Unless there is a creator behind it.
That's a strange formula for a rational argument. Existence exists, therefore God. That doesn't follow. I might be mischaracterizing your argument, to be fair, but that's what I'm understanding you just said.
Well, here's the dichotomy boiled down, right? Either God is behind all things, God is the source of all creation, and thus all morality and all good and all consciousness, everything that we're experiencing within ourselves, without ourselves, in our relationships with each other, this very Skype call, all of it is a result of God's creation and God's involvement in the universe, or the whole thing is completely absurd and meaningless, and you don't have a definition for good, so you can't judge good, so we should just do whatever we want and act as animals. Because it's just matter colliding. What does it matter what the good is if there's no moral foundation of God? It's just matter colliding. What does it matter if that woman had a forced abortion on her? It's just a clump of cells and energy, right? It doesn't matter.
So let me make sure I understand this. We have you presented a dichotomy that says either God started, created everything, and everything we have today is because of God. And without that, it's basically complete chaos. There's no reason to be good. There's no shit. Why did I do that? I stopped writing it down. Now I forgot.
No, that's pretty much it. I didn't say chaotic. I think you're on. You're on the right.
I was going somewhere with that, and I should have wrote it down before I started talking. I'm sorry. I should have wrote it down. Now I done forgot my train of thought. I hate. Oh my god, this is so frustrating. By the way, I am having great fun.
Yeah, me too.
This is an absolute pleasure.
I know. I'm smiling. I'm trying to.
just to break the tension for a minute. No, it's really good.
We don't have to keep racing forward. If you want me to repeat anything,
right? No, I remember. I remember what I was going to say. I remember. So basically, I've characterized your argument so far between the dichotomy of the two things. Is that so far so good?
Except you introduced the word chaos, and I think that's a bit of a distraction from what I said. I'm just talking about meaning and morality. And I'm saying without God, all of this is just matter colliding, and it's utterly meaningless, and morality is just a made-up thing, which means it's relative to whoever made it up, to each of us.
So again, I can go back and say, well, yeah, that God might be the only reason there's meaning. Sure, that doesn't necessarily mean he's good or moral, righteous. It doesn't mean any of that stuff. Again, it could just mean he is. Plain and simple, he just is. It could mean that. That doesn't answer the question, is he evil? Is he bad? I mean, how do we know that the greatest trick ever pulled by the devil was to convince us that he is God himself? I would argue by the things that we've seen him do in the past that maybe we are accidentally worshiping Satan. There's no possible way of knowing this based on the information that we have in that book, other than the conflicting information. There's too much things that go on both sides of the fence, and I'm just like, how do you know that you're not worshiping the devil who's masquerading as I'm good, worship me, fear me, hate me, even if you have to, as long as you do what I say, I won't punish you. Like that sounds like a very abusive relationship, and I'm not down for that, dude.
Sure. Well, I would ask then, is it preferable to not exist?
Preferable to not exist?
Can you prefer not existing?
What a strange question. I mean, I'm already existing. I don't really have much choice in the matter aside I can kill myself, but I would prefer to live. Yeah, I mean,
sure, but
I guess if you press me for an answer, I'd say yeah, I guess it's preferable to exist. Sure.
No, I think I need to ask it a slightly different way because, obviously, once we exist, we can end our lives and we can prefer not to exist, and some people act upon that suicidality. What I'm saying is logically, like in principle, not in the experience of an existent being, but can non-existence prefer to exist, and therefore is it a logical option? Okay. What I'm trying to get at here is it's an obvious question, but what I'm trying to get at here is that existence presupposes, sorry, let me frame it the other way. Good and evil, morality, moral questions about what we should and shouldn't do, and is God good or evil, is the devil good or evil, all of these things presuppose existence, right? And God very clearly identified in the Bible, as per our agreement about how we're debating this, we're agreeing to the terms of the Bible of who God is. Now, without that God, we do not exist. Nothing exists. The universe is nothing. And there is no good or morality or evil or any of it, or you or me. There is nothing without God. So God transcends morality. Right?
What is the source? What's your response?
So I'm sort of not exactly affirming God is good. I'm saying good is a
Yeah, I was gonna
subsequent.
point that out.
Yeah.
That doesn't point out, that doesn't affirm anything. That just says God is, and He is the reason why there's good, and there's a
Yes.
reason why there's morals. And I think to kind of touch on what you had mentioned before about being, is it preferable to exist? I don't. I think I feel like I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like you were trying to wrap that into like a universally preferable kind of wrapper for me there. Is that kind of where you were going with that?
Look, almost it was just a way to preface the next question, which is it good to be alive? Is it good to exist?
Right. And if you start your question with that basis, I mean, I don't think universally preferable behavior refers to how we treat each other and how we act in the universe in relation to one another. I mean, there is no morals if you're by yourself and you live alone. There's no reason to, there is no thou shalt not murder because there's nobody to murder. There is no thou shalt not rape. There is nobody.
Morality extends beyond human relationships if God is part of the equation. We're in relation, like somebody on. It's a distraction because I wasn't actually referring to UPB. I'm trying to get into some raw logic here and just say that, do you think, Daniel, that life and existence are good? Like, is it good to be alive, or would the whole thing be better if it never happened, if we weren't here? You rapped about it.
Yeah, I'm rather enjoying myself. So yeah,
good,
I'm
right?
glad to be alive.
And God is the source of that, and it wouldn't be without God. And so I think it's fair to say on that basis that God is good.
Again, I feel like we have to keep repeating this, but for the sake of this argument, maybe the God is the source of my existence. Maybe God is the reason why I'm happy to be alive. He's the reason for it, but it still doesn't answer the question: is God Himself good? It just answers the question of everything in existence is here for a reason. We're not discussing the existence of God. And I know we keep kind of drifting toward that direction, I would love to have that conversation with you. I would totally love to have that conversation with you at some point. But
James,
James'
premise at the beginning was that God is good and God equates to good, and that God is more than that. So,
and rather,
is that what you're saying, Daniel?
More directly relating to the question, there is no good without God, is what I'm trying to say here.
Sure,
there you go.
That could be the case, right? But I'm still trying to tie that nice little bow that says God is good. Then. Versus he's just indifferent, or
goodness presupposes God.
Maybe there's no way to tie in these human attributed words like good, bad, evil, moral, conscious, righteous. Maybe like you said, it's so far above us and beyond us we don't even understand it. In which case, it's kind of almost the same thing as non-existence in that case. I mean, we have to, if we're going to follow somebody or something or some idea or some principle, we have to agree that principle that we're striving for needs to be good in some fashion or another. I mean, unless you are an evil person striving for evil principles. I mean,
so what is an evil person?
I think we've pretty well defined that throughout the course of the conversation.
Just to take a slightly different angle, do animals experience good and evil? Do they know what good is, what evil is, and do they act out of that moral law in their hearts, in a sense?
I think animals understand morals and principles and good and evil about the same way as a dog catching a frisbee understands physics.
Okay, I agree with that. And so, what is it? I'll answer this myself. The biblical perspective is that the thing that gives us moral agency, the thing that makes us capable of understanding the concept of morality and discerning whether something is good or not, right, is God's creation in us, making us in His image. God is a moral creator. And He made and God knows the difference between good and evil, and God made us to know the difference between good and evil. We are in His image.
Now, I would agree insofar as to say that if we hold God up as the ideal, like meta-human or the meta, what it means to be human, then that kind of follows along with Jordan Peterson's principles that he was talking about in those biblical lectures. That it's like everything that is us is all kind of wrapped up in this one package, and it says, we're created in His image. That's who we need to strive to be, and that's where we need to go. But then that doesn't really say I just can't quite get to where that becomes God. It maybe unless we're talking about
because
God
you're
as an ideal
presupposing
and not
again
as a
you're
God.
putting man first. That's the trouble here, and there's no easy way around this between us, Daniel, because you're presupposing that man created God, and you're still doing it. You're saying we have to get from man up to being God, and I'm saying no, there is no man without God first. God is the only one who can judge morality, and we only judge morality to the extent that God enabled us to do so. There is no judge but God.
That's not quite what I was. That's not quite what I was saying. What I'm saying is that that's supposed to be what we're supposed to be, at least according to the teachings of the Bible, is that's what we're supposed to be striving toward, to try to be more God-like or more Jesus-like in case of modern day Christianity. And I again we have to determine, is that being that we're striving to be, is that somebody we want to be? Is that somebody we want to strive for? I'm sorry, but I feel like I am way more moral person than God has ever been or expressed himself to be in the Bible. There's just I'm sorry. I'm never going to go out and kill a bunch of Israelites because they disagreed with me. I'm sorry.
You're reverting back to the same argument that James stated earlier, that you are the arbiter of what is good. But so your logic is circular at the moment.
That's what I'm trying to figure out is when we I guess given the Bible and we were able to finally read it, we look in it and there's so many different people interpreting it in so many different ways, and it's not clear. It's absolutely not clear what it means, and everybody's trying to figure it out. And we're trying to strive to be this perfect being. We're we'll never be that, obviously. Nobody is, but we're trying to strive to be, and we have that as our reference guide. We have to start there as our in this particular argument debate as our basis for our knowledge.
So if you're saying that the Bible is too difficult to navigate in order to get a picture of what we ought to be as human beings, you might not have read the New Testament, because I think it's pretty crystal clear who we should be striving to be like in Christ. And do you think you're more moral than Christ?
Was Christ
matter of fact, I do have a few. Let's see. Yeah, I would say so.
Okay,
I'm going to go with yeah.
Hit me. How has Christ lowered himself below you?
So I know a lot of people. I know a lot of people will use this argument that, well, the New Testament's here and we don't really worry about the Old Testament stuff. That's old law. It turns out that's not really the case. If you actually read the Bible, Matthew 5:17 says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from law until all is accomplished." The key takeaway there is that Jesus approves of the law and the prophets, the Levitical laws, and he hasn't the slightest objection to the cruelties of the Old Testament.
So are you raising that because... Go, James.
Christ is saying that he fulfills the law, which means that the new covenant is begun, and that's what a testament. That's what the New Testament is the testament of a new covenant with God in Christ, right? So it doesn't disregard.
You can't take the words and turn them around and make them mean something else. It specifically says, "Until heaven and earth pass away." That hasn't happened. As far as I know, the earth is still here. I don't know about heaven, but I know the earth is still here, and it says very clearly. You said it was very clear and crystal clear, and it says to me right here, crystal clearly, "Until heaven and earth pass away," and they have not.
Yeah, I'm not saying they have, and I'm not saying that the laws have changed. But which laws are you saying are the immoral ones?
Again, I'm not familiar with the Levitical laws. I need to go back and read them again, but I do understand that these are referring back to Old Testament doctrine.
Yeah, so you're raising that because you don't think the Levitical part of the Bible is moral.
I don't think the Old Testament is null and void like everybody wants to say it is.
No, who's saying it is? I don't know a single Christian who says that the Old Testament is null and void.
Why has that argument been raised now? That is a tangent.
Well, the question that I started this off with was, do you think you're more moral than Christ? And I'd like you to show me how Christ, in his words and in his deeds and in his life as depicted in the Gospels, how has Christ succumbed to sin in a way that makes you more morally righteous than he?
And just to answer Daniel's question.
Now we're putting together. We're trying to conflate sin with moral, and I don't think that's necessarily the same thing.
Well, it is, but I'm happy to put the word sin aside and just say breach of morality instead. How has he
Okay,
breached
so
morality?
in terms of breach of morality, I'm going to go with okay. Let's try this one here. Let me make sure I got the right one here before I start reading it. I need to make better notes on my quotes here. So Mark 7 says, "You leave the commandment of God and hold to the tradition of man." And he said to the Jews, "You have a fine way of rejecting the commandment of God in order to establish your tradition. For Moses said, 'Honor your father and your mother, and whoever reviles father or mother must surely die.'" Like, Jesus, you revile your mother, you have to die? Like, you disrespect mom, like, you must die? Like, that seems a little extreme, doesn't it? That doesn't seem like a moral thing to wish upon anyone.
Well, will the person who reviles their mother and father die?
And will they die?
Yes.
Will they ever die? Will they ever die in their time on earth?
I'm not really sure what that means.
Everyone dies.
You might have to fill me in on some extra information.
Everyone dies. Now, death in the Bible is the result of human sin. Okay, and it's
So
not that is not a commandment to murder somebody. That is not a commandment to stone or kill somebody. Right? That is a commandment to say that death stems from sin, as it does in the book of Genesis, and sin.
So you're saying Captain Obvious wrote in and said, "Well, everybody's going to die, so don't disrespect your mom." Like,
no,
that's not.
It's talking about the second death, which is that after death, we will either be resurrected in Christ and live in eternity, or we'll be discarded.
Yeah, I have not researched the second death phenomenon just yet, so that's a little beyond my knowledge at this point.
Right. So maybe we put that point aside until we can get into a bit more biblical exegesis. But I would say it's a pretty tall.
And I do realize that was a really bold thing for me to say. I'm just kind of it's fine.
You can retract it if you like. Because
I don't think I have enough.
You're making the claim that you are more moral than Jesus, right? And it is a bold thing to say, and it's
very bold. And
you're going to have to be able to back that up with biblical exegesis or proper research. And I'm totally fine to leave that aside if you can't yet, and maybe you can in the future. I'm not saying I've won that one. I'm just saying that if you can't back it up, then maybe we need to go on a different track.
Well, let me take one more swing at it, just so I don't end up leaving these
he's determined to beat Jesus.
Unused. Let me just see what you're saying here, and
we're falling down a rabbit hole.
No, I've had these discussions many times. I know it's an impossible feat,
And
but
look,
I'm going to give it a shot.
And I would not for a second claim that I have all the answers about how to interpret the Bible perfectly. I'm on a very long journey of learning there too.
Agree.
No, you just said it was. I thought you said it was crystal clear.
It's crystal clear in the person of Christ, who he was, how he lived, what he said and did, and his example.
Yeah, I think I can give you that. I don't understand how you can kind of just ignore all the rest of it and say, yeah, that's the guy. That's my guy. I mean, sure, but
the rest of it, the Old Testament. Sorry, keep going.
So let me try that. Let me try this one here. See, I'm just curious. Honestly, I'm just at this point just curious what you might say about it. But Matthew 10:34 states, "Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law."
Yeah.
And he goes on saying in 10:21, let me finish this up and then I'll let you respond. A brother will deliver brother over to death, and the father his child, and the children will rise against parents and have them put to death. Like, what's your interpretation of that? I'm just curious.
Well, I need to hear the second part again in a minute, but the first part is the sword is not a literal sword. I think that's pretty self-evident. This is symbolic.
How do you know?
This is symbolic
language.
I don't
think Jesus was a carpenter. He didn't walk around with swords.
Yeah, Jesus was actually very clear and if you look at other, like, again, when you take,
you know that, Daniel.
When you take,
wait, so when he was hang on, was the cross also symbolic?
Let me speak, please. Absolutely.
Like, you can't just
let James respond.
Let me speak.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
Jesus makes it very clear in other parts of his speech that he is against taking up the literal sword. He who picks up the sword will die by the sword, right? And he commands his apostles to put the sword away. And there's other examples of it where Jesus is very clear that we should turn the other cheek rather than respond in violence, okay? So when he's speaking of the sword here, the word, I've forgotten the actual Hebrew word, the Greek word, but the word for sword, and you can look this up, the word for sword in Greek is actually a reference to a very specific kind of knife that was actually used for gutting fish. It wasn't used as a weapon in war. And the reason that is used symbolically is that the knife cleaves two things apart, right? It separates. So the sword is symbolic of separation in that particular part of the scripture. And what he's saying is absolutely true. I'm not here to bring peace. I'm here to cleave people apart. And we see this in Christianity, right? We see that when one person comes to faith in Christ, it puts division in families, mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters.
It sounds a little bit like a cult leader that separates their families so they'll follow him. I mean, what would be the fundamental difference?
Yeah, you could say that, but God is the leader of that cult, and He created the universe, and He's going to switch it off one day.
The Greek word is makaira. Makaira?
Thank you.
And to bring it back to your other point, how do you know that the sword in your other reference was not symbolic? How do you determine that one is symbolic and one is not?
Because one of the apostles picked up a sword and chopped off the ear of one of the Jewish soldiers, and Jesus said, "Stop and put your sword away. He who picks up the sword will die by the sword." And then he healed the ear of the wounded soldier, his enemy. He healed his enemy. So that's how I know. It's very, very clear.
Do you remember that story?
Okay, so that one's pretty clear that he's talking about a literal sword, but the other one doesn't necessarily say, yeah. I mean, it's just...
People didn't use fishing fillet knives on each other in war. Just saying.
Sure. And the second verse that you said you'd have to hear again said, he goes on saying, brother will deliver brother over to death, and the father his child. The children will rise against parents and have them put to death. What is that? What does that mean?
I don't know.
Please.
That one I don't know. I'm gonna have to read that in the full context as well because that one I haven't studied. So I'm happy to say that's one that I'm not not familiar enough to argue.
No snark involved here, but I am so happy you finally said I don't know about something. That's amazing. I don't feel so stupid now.
Oh no, there's so much I don't know about the Bible and how to exegete it properly. I've got plenty of learning to do. I just happen to have come across that other passage about the I come to bring a sword. Right. I've read extensively about that one. But
I both certainly do have a lot of. Yeah, it does certainly seem like you and I both have a lot of not education, but research to do, a lot more information to try to suss out of these texts and of the world in general to determine reality. That's a long, arduous road. I mean, a long, arduous road to try to determine reality itself. That's a tough. I mean, even the concept of reality had to have taken a millennia to evolve over. I can't even imagine like who finally said, "Hey, reality. What? How do I know I'm real?" Like that fascinates me. I'm sorry.
Didn't someone say, "I think, therefore I am"?
I mean that eventually was kind of the nuts and bolts boiled down version of it, but before that it's like, wow, how I like that. That kind of thing just keeps me going. It's so exciting.
There's this concept,
hell of a side point.
I love it. I'm much the same. I thrive on this stuff and thinking about how our walk with God and our walk with ourselves and reality and concepts has evolved over time in our species. But there's this concept in the book of Ecclesiastes that there is nothing new under the sun, right? I would highly encourage you, Daniel, to pick up the Bible some more and go through it with Jordan Peterson is brilliant, and he's bringing a really great way to look at the Bible that I find fascinating and inspiring. And there are, as was actually predicted in the Bible, there are more books in the world than can fill all the libraries about how to read and understand the Bible. It's the height of arrogance for any of us to pick up this, right, and read a verse and go, "Ha! Well, he said that, and I disagree, so it's wrong." Like there is so much contextual, critical thinking to be done. There's so much history to understand. There's so much linguistics. You don't actually understand the Bible fully unless you read Greek as well, and I'm not there. There's so much knowledge to be had that any cursory reading, and in particularly any reading of parts of Scripture out of context, it's very dangerous to assume that you know the full depth of their meaning or the context of their meaning. So I just encourage you to, as a skeptic, as an atheist, as somebody who wants to free people like Dia and I from our delusion, if you want to do it effectively, pick up the Bible and study it, man.
I know you said I'm trying to free you from your delay. I could care less, to be honest. I think you guys are great people. I have no problem with Christians. I really don't. I think the enemies are more in other arenas at this point. And I think right now, the fact that we're able to have this discussion right now speaks a lot.
Absolutely.
Especially
We
when you
love
look at
you,
other,
Daniel.
especially when we look at other religions that would not have any of this at all. We would not be having this conversation if, say, you were Muslim and I was atheist. Like that would not be happening.
Well,
I do want to
appreciate
ask
that.
Yeah. And again, like I said, as far as religions go, Christianity is probably on my number one top list. If I ever do, become convinced that God is real, I may jump over. I'm
We'll
still
be praying for you,
open-minded
bro.
to it. So,
We'll be praying.
right, I do appreciate that. Let me ask you this though.
It'll be converted in a year.
Let me ask you this though. You seem to agree with me earlier, just basically
Guys agree on a lot of things.
by some head nod. I think we do agree on more things than we disagree, but
Yeah.
I agree.
I mentioned I mentioned the lower IQ concept that a lot of people with lower IQ kind of need religion because they need that comfort blanket, so to speak. And I'm just curious because
Are we going to exchange IQs?
Yes. Let me get your IQ, dude. Hey. No, I'm just curious. What is like the amount of work you put into it to try to understand it, and the amount of, like you said, you got to study Greek, you got to look in the Bible, you got to study all these works, and you're like, how is somebody of lesser intelligence supposed to even come close to competing, or like, how are they supposed to be able to read that same text you're reading? And like, I'm concerned for those people in this case.
All right. Well, I'm going to talk about religious concepts here, so you just have to
Sure.
take that context first.
No, I really am just curious. I'm just
yeah. So, and this is one thing that absolutely sets Christianity apart is the sanctification by God through the Holy Spirit. Right now, the Bible is God-breathed word into humans across 1,500 years in differing contexts, in a wildly changing political and economic atmosphere. This story that is one narrative of man's beginnings and his ends is right there, and it's designed by God to breathe new life into the one who reads it, who is his elect. Now God is choosing his people and not his his enemies, the people that he will discard, the people who will not make it to the eternal kingdom of heaven with him. And the Bible is intended to be the trigger by which people experience a regeneration in the Holy Spirit and are born again. And this is where that language comes from in Christian circles about being born again, is that you are born again when the word of Christ moves in you through the Holy Spirit. And so you don't actually have to be able to read at all to have a Holy Spirit experience. If you are sanctified by God through the Holy Spirit and you come to faith in Christ, then you are his elect. You have been chosen by God, and it doesn't have to come about by reading the Bible. And you certainly don't have to be high IQ or understand the Bible or be a Bible scholar. Christianity is for all people. It's for all races. It's for all intelligences. It's for all levels of education or no level of education at all. And that's the big difference, is that you are sanctified by becoming a child of Christ by the Holy Spirit, and it changes you fundamentally and makes you want to be a little Christ in the way that you walk. And this has happened to billions and billions of people across history. And this is what's happened to me. It's very hard to... A huge part of it is a very subjective experience that is very hard to communicate convincingly to unbelievers. But I tell my story to anyone who's had the same experience, the same Holy Spirit experience, and they know exactly what I mean because they've been there. That's
a pretty good answer. Again, I've been a Christian before, so I can understand where you're coming from on many of these concepts. I'm not completely, just straight up unbeliever from the time I was born. When you were a
Christian, did you experience Christ?
I guess I
there's
thought I did, but I couldn't explain it. I mean, there's no explanation for stuff. I thought ghosts were real. I thought I could, I thought I felt ghosts, but turns out there was an explanation for it. Sometimes there was an explanation for it because I wasn't smart enough to figure it out.
Daniel,
things do happen.
I'd also argue on your behalf.
It doesn't automatically say, "Hey, God exists."
I would argue on your behalf. I know you'll reject it, but maybe part of you can take it on board a little bit. But I would argue on your behalf that you know Christ in your heart already, in your love for your children, for your wife, in your love for your neighbor, in how exultant with joy you are that we can disagree and not become violent in our respect for universality.
Oh no. Under the waistline, like down here under the camera where you can't see, I'm violent as hell right now. You don't even understand how violent I am.
Really sus, man.
I am wearing pants. I am wearing pants.
I would posit that the moralist atheist, the secular humanist like yourself, who does believe in objective morality, does believe in right and wrong, believes in and experiences love and tries to act out of goodness and kindness. And you preach your views to try to bring more people to be good and kind, to reduce the violence, to increase the love, right? And I would argue that all of that is operating out of God's working in you and Christ in your heart, but you are failing to recognize the foundation upon which that morality is built. And I think, you could join us.
I hope you're right. To be honest, I hope you're right. Maybe you're right. I just haven't seen it yet. I don't know. I'm not convinced just yet. I mean, how much easier it would be. You know how much easier it would be for me to be a Christian down here in the Bible Belt of the South? I mean, like it would be phenomenally easier. I get such funny looks just at the mention that I'm atheist. What? like it blows people's minds around here.
If it would be easier, what is your reasoning for remaining atheistic in nature? Like
again, you don't choose your beliefs.
Easier is not necessarily true.
Right. I can't choose to believe God exists. It's like either beliefs aren't chosen. It's kind of explaining that concept, but you can't
exactly
choose
what
it.
I said before.
And I think James is in a position where you know it.
Yes.
And at some level, you think.
Well, he said it earlier, didn't he? He knows it, and you're like, no, but to be fair, you don't know. And then James is very adamant. No, but I know.
Yeah, he's like, hello, I know, dude. Yeah.
I'll explain.
And I believe you. I believe you that you do know. I in your heart of hearts, you believe you know, and I completely respect that you're willing to see the evidence as it comes in, and you're willing to go in the direction. I mean, I wish everybody was like that. That would be amazing. If people
and I would
would
say,
do that,
Daniel, that I know only by God's grace, by an unearned gift. Right? I was not looking for this. It came upon me in a spiritual experience. The Holy Spirit moved in me. God is working in my life, and I'm going to pray, man, continually that he does so for you too, because I think you could have a radical explosion of joy and hope in your life, and I think you're on the precipice, man. Like I don't want to.
That might require, an intervention of sort.
It will require that baptism in the Holy Spirit, that baptism in the Holy Spirit, and you don't get to choose it. But I would say, man, the best thing you could do to find Christ is try to disprove him. Man, try to pick this thing up, really dig into it, and read all of the arguments for and against it. There are books and books and books that you can get into, and then here's the two options if you really study hard on the Bible, right? You will either become the most undefeatable atheist, cutting down false doctrines everywhere you go, right? Or you will find Christ and be saved and live in eternity with the rest of us. So either way is cool. I reckon you should go for it, but read the word.
I'm not going to really point out how insulting that was just now, but I know you mean well.
You know I do. Look, and this is the thing, is that a lot of Christians, because we live in such a secular culture, generally in the West, a lot of Christians shy away from boldly proclaiming the truth, and I will not do that. I know the truth. I know in God, and you are wrong, Daniel, but I love you and I want you to know the truth. But I will not shy away and pretend that the battleground is yours. The battleground is Christ's, and you are denying the truth. But I think you will find it if you keep looking honestly with an open heart.
Thanks, Dad. Appreciate it, man.
All right, let's bring this back to the subject matter at hand. Is God good? What would you guys say were the conclusions that we came to today?
I think we're exactly in the same place where we started.
Back where we started, yeah. I think we need to leave this up to the. Let's leave it up to the comments section.
Yeah,
the comments.
I mean, I mean, to be honest, that's the purpose of these discussions. I mean, I don't think, it would be unreasonable for me to think that I'm necessarily going to sway you in an hour and a half, and you're going to sway me in an hour and a half. It's more to do with we're creating this content. Let the viewers decide. Let them look and do more research on their own. Let them take all that different collective of data points and figure out what is the most real to them and what makes more sense to them, and follow that path.
But we're also, well, at least Dia and I are sowing little seeds in your heart, Daniel. That's the other objective here. Is that I agree. We're not gonna make you a born again Christian in an hour and a half. But if we can speak, if God can work through us in these conversations and allow us to speak truth to you in a way that challenges your foundations, that makes you unsure of yourself, that makes you realize, I've got work to do, so that you seek greater knowledge, better understanding with an open heart, then maybe they are the beginnings of a journey to Christ. That's my hope.
Again, I know in your heart. Again, I know in your heart you mean well, but that's incredibly condescending.
It's arrogant as hell. I know it's arrogant as hell. But I hold the truth of God. I'm resting on the fact that I know you well enough that I know you mean well, and I'm not going to be offended by it. Coming from anybody else, I would be highly offended. I don't at all deny that it's a completely arrogant thing for me to say, but I say it in full faith in my God.
Sure.
And I say it in full love for you, man. Like I want this for you. That's why I say it.
So in all fairness and all good sportsmanship, I would like to retract one thing. I don't think, because I don't have enough research to back me up on this yet, I don't think I'm more moral than Jesus, but I do think that I am certainly more moral than God himself.
I knew you were going to say that.
Dude, I think you had your foot in the door of like eternal damnation and you've just pulled it back out. I'm kidding. Maybe not. I don't know. It's not for me to say there, but I will retract.
Right.
Well, not
Quit
retract.
Judging me, dude. Stop judging me. It's not your job.
I want to clarify. I don't want to retract something, but I want to clarify something that I was saying earlier about that you can't know anything without God. And I want to make clear that I don't think that means that you don't know anything, Daniel, because you don't have God. I believe you do, and I believe that everyone knows things, but that the foundation of that knowledge is God, even if you don't recognize the foundation. So I think you're an incredibly wise and and astute guy. I really admire your skepticism, and I admire your balls in going into these debates as well, and to put forward what you believe. There's an arrogance in you as well, Daniel, to even bother starting a YouTube channel and preach the truth that you see. So let all of us continue to seek truth in that light and preach arrogantly and with conviction what we believe, and may the truth win in all of us.
All right, man. I consider you both brothers and sisters all the way, man. I think we're all generally trying to strive for the same general thing. Aside from the religious part of it, I think we all have a very shared sense of values, and that we're trying to strive for. And I think that's probably the most important thing here, that we continue to move forward and help each other out moving in that direction.
How was my moderating?
Good.
Oh, sorry. Hey, James. I think Dia really needs a scratch on the back too. We've been over here, jerking each other off. I think we need to go scratch her on the back a little bit. Dia, you did a fantastic job. You were awesome. I mean, you were making sure to be fair as possible. I didn't feel like I was being double teamed.
Okay,
good. That's good. I felt I could see Dia on the edge, like I just want to defend Christ. But there was good discipline.
Thank you. Actually, how do you know that?
If you had to give it a number, how many times did you bite your tongue if you had to guess a number?
16.
That's pretty good. Yeah, that's about right.
So maybe next time. Maybe next time we can set it up that Dia is one of the debaters, and we can moderate for her so she can let it all out, vent it all.
I'd be too scared. This is why I want to do debates on my channel, but I don't know if I'm as brave as the two of you who put your hands up to do this. So.
Well, thank you so much for organising it, Dia, and for thinking to put us together. It's been ages since I've chatted to Daniel, and it's a real pleasure to talk to him again and to face off and challenge our ideas. And I hope we can do it again. I had a lot of fun.
I'm glad that I reunited you guys. It was so weird when I found out you guys already knew each other. But
no, you said James Fox Higgins. I'm going to be on it. I'm like, James, I know him. I've totally been on his show.
I didn't believe you. I was like, how could you be on his show? He's all the way in Australia.
Yeah.
So it's this thing called the internet.
Honestly, I don't know how I connected with so many Aussies. I don't know how that's happening, but I'm okay with it. You guys are
Yeah.
great.
It's God's country,
It's
mate.
Aussies.
Is that what it is?
It's God's country. Yeah.
Dude, I'm living in the Bible Belt. I know better. This is God's country. I'm in it.
The atheist
Well,
says.
I guess we can wrap
God bless.
it up. Right, guys?
God bless America. All right.
Yep,
God bless America.
Well,
Not
God bless you.
Australia.
God bless you,
America.
Daniel. Thank you. Thanks for your time, mate, and for chatting. And God
Thanks,
bless you, dear.
everyone,
Thanks
for
for putting us
watching.
together.
God
bless us
I will put this
all.
on my playlist. I will put this on a playlist on my own channel, and this is obviously readily accessible on James Fox Higgins' show and on the Rational Rise, and maybe you put it on your playlist too, so they can watch it.
All right.
Excellent.
All
Thanks so
right.
much. See you.